Welcome back. We have just got quorum in the room, and thanks for those online for joining. Right, we have item 11. We've got Jackie and Dave on the update on the strategic approach to sediment program, or the Mayor was calling it the SAS program. Quite different, Mayor. Kia ora.
Kia ora, thank you, Chair, and thanks, members. This is an update on the program that we've been running for a few years now. I just will introduce ourselves. Dave Allen, Manager, Natural Environment Strategy, and Jackie Reid and my team, Senior Analyst, Natural Environment Strategy. I just wanted to note that we've got an attachment to this report which outlines a few case studies in terms of how we're approaching as an organisation the issue of sediment management. Sediment management is one of our biggest environmental issues, and I think what we wanted to try and emphasise with this presentation was that this is about actually doing better with what we actually have got in our existing toolkit, and looking for innovation and applying some new tools to get better outcomes. So we're trying to get alongside a lot of the different parts of council to actually make those improvements. So I'll hand across to Jackie and she'll run through the presentation.
Kia ora koutou. I just want to acknowledge the other departments and CCOs that we've been working with over the last year. We've been working with the licensing and compliance team, healthy waters and flood resilience team, environmental services, plans and places, and Auckland Transport. And for our machine learning artificial intelligence work, we've been working with Linker Analytics and Zealandia Consulting. We've produced 2 technical reports that we've uploaded onto Knowledge Auckland, and this morning we've released a GIS viewer in the Auckland Council apps portal that will show you the 5 catchments that we've studied pre and post Gabrielle and our mapping of bare earth in those catchments. The purpose of our report today is to provide you with our progress over the last year, show you some of our trials that we've been doing, and then to show you what our proposed next steps are so we can get some of your feedback, because we haven't been in front of you for a few years, and in fact we've been giving you info memos for every year for about 3 or 4 years now. So for those of you who've not really heard much about this programme, we have 6 focus areas. We work in these areas, but it's actually a collective of these 6 areas that we work in to try to reduce sediments from going into our waterways. So if we get better information, we can influence that strategy and policy space. We're always looking for different and new interventions. We also want to improve the way we monitor and evaluate what we do. We cooperate both internally and externally to build our capacity, and we're here to communicate and engage with the construction sector in particular. You all know why sediment's important. It's a complex problem. It really does require a strategic approach across council. As part of the National Policy Statement for Fresh Water Management, council has undertaken a Section 35 review. Our state of environment monitoring tells us that sediment is still a problem in our waterways, estuaries and coastal receiving environments. It's a sediment that we have to have regard to under the Resource Management Act, under our Auckland Unitary Plan around land disturbance, and it's also in our water strategy, and it's a specific action item in our water strategy. Sorry, need to press a bit harder. The next 2 slides, this one is focusing on our urban areas, which we have this year, and the next slide will talk about our rural areas. The slide on the left-hand side, or the photo, sorry, on the left-hand side, is actually taken from some cameras that we've been putting out across Auckland. Some of them are at industrial sites, some of them are at small construction sites, which is the middle and right-hand side photo on that slide. We've been using machine learning, artificial intelligence to identify sediment discharges in real time so that we can be alerted and our compliance staff can go out and investigate these particular discharges. The one on the left of that photo, we noticed a discharge at 4 o'clock nearly every day on a work day. So something is being washed down likely, and so we can go out and try and track and trace it back up the network. We are also currently undertaking a review of our guidance document, commonly known as GDO5. This is a live document, and we update it regularly as new practices come into play, but we're taking a broader review of that, and we're working with the construction sector to provide their thoughts into this, and also looking at our compliance data, we're feeding that back into the review. We want to align this, the trial of our cameras with the critical pipe assessment maintenance program that already have cameras in the region. They're looking at block pipes, but we can also use our machine learn model to identify sediments. And in fact, we can train the model to identify sediments in most locations. Move on to our rural sediment issues we've been looking at this year. Because of all the large magnitude storm events we've had, they've really impacted our unsealed rural roads. And so we work with Auckland Transport to bring into their environmental criteria for assessing their roading programme to look at sediments in particular. We started with the Rodney area, and then we've expanded that work across the whole region, and we've prioritised all the unsealed rural roads. The GIS mapping on the left-hand side, it's a bit hard to see, but you can see some red areas, and there are also some brown areas, and that's bare earth that we've mapped from satellite imagery based on a 15-degree slope. We've also got overland flow paths and streams and ecosystem areas mapped. And what we've done is we've identified areas that are vulnerable to sediments. The worst ones are in red, obviously, and the sort of medium is yellow, and sort of zero, if you like, is green. And so what we can do is we can prioritise our funding to areas of unsealed rural roads that are a real source of sediment that go into our waterways. What's really nice about this work is that we've taken post-Gabrielle satellite imagery, mapped the bare earth areas across the whole region, and we've been able to create a way of identifying areas that are really important as critical sources of sediment that can go into our waterways. We found that so good that we also did a pre-Gabrielle mapping exercise of satellite imagery so that we could try to estimate what land use and what land types might have got eroded more across the region after Gabrielle. So we decided we'd do a trial and just pick 5 catchments, and that's what we've got available on the mapping app that I mentioned earlier. What was really interesting about this work is that you can look at the area of bare earth and estimate what the sediment load would potentially be down into the estuaries. So if we can do that after an event, we can do that as often as you like with satellite imagery. It's a really clever and important way we could start to get scale with our sediment management and our decisions that we want to make around our land use. These sediment heat maps are easy to do. We can align it with all of our other programs that we have, like the freshwater management tool, our other programs and incentives for planting up areas that are prone to erosion, and maybe even expand those. You can see in this particular slide that the area's pasture, but not all pasture is the same. You can't say that there's a lot of sediment coming off pasture. It depends on so many different variables. But after a large event like we've had, we can look at areas that are really vulnerable to erosion and work with farmers and farm plan in the farm planning exercise to identify those critical sediment sources. And maybe we can incentivise the retiring and planting out of those highly erodible areas. The main thing that we found out from these 5 catchment examples, and it'll be no surprise to you around the table that slope and aspect were the biggest influences on sediment erosion. Where you had indigenous forests or bush blocks, they were less affected overall. Pasture was the worst affected land use type, but not in all places. So it is very place-based. So for the coming year, we want to now focus more on compliance in urban areas. We want to use this new technology at those urban growth sites. We want to work more closely with the industry and sector groups. We also want to look at some of the permitted activities, especially in the ecologically significant areas, to make sure they do meet with our standards and rules. And we want to continue to use this information and plug the gaps that may come up as we go through our plan change in 2026-27. Look forward to hearing your comments and feedbacks.
Just to round this off, approaching sediment is a wicked problem, so we need to look at short, medium, long-term solutions. We also need to look at our innovation opportunities, and so what we've really focused on now in the last year is how we can apply innovation in a way that's going to add value, and we've come across a number of different approaches here that we think have got some value. So this is about making our existing council programs across our council group more effective in terms of how they're delivering on the improvements that they seek to achieve. So this is why we have a strategic approach, is to try and look for those opportunities for improvement. It's evidence of a continuous improvement approach that we're trying to adopt here, working alongside our council group to see how we can actually make the improvements. There's a couple of case studies that we just refer you to in the attachment. They sort of speak to the different areas that we've covered off in this presentation, whether it's satellite imagery and operations responses in terms of regulatory compliance staff. I would note that the regulatory compliance results is showing some quite promising trends in terms of the small building site inspections, where we've basically got a lot of improved passes in terms of when compliance staff go and visit those sites. They're actually now finding compliance with some of the small earthworks measures they should be looking to adhere to. And I guess the other one is some of the planning opportunities that we have in terms of how this information can be applied in our planning framework, looking to the future and take the opportunity there to sort of introduce some appropriate fit-for-purpose rules as appropriate in our planning framework. So Jackie has just outlined for you, a bit of an overview of what we've been doing over the last year, but also signal very clearly sort of our next steps in terms of we think there's more opportunity in the innovation space to actually take this further. It again speaks to the value for money approach. It speaks to efficiencies in terms of actually getting something done. And also, of course, the ultimate goal is to reduce sediment from our waterways and our receiving environments, which has been a very long-held view in terms of what both the community at large and this council wishes to see. So with that, I'll leave it there.
Kia ora. Thank you, Jackie. Thank you, Dave. Go to some questions. Councillor Sayers. And did you want to move this at all, Councillor Sayers? Yeah. I'm happy to second. You've got a question?
Yeah, I've got 2 questions. One in the report, Dave, and thank you, Jackie, for the report. You mentioned the Kaipara Moana, involvement with Kaipara Moana, and the fact that I think you've said, the jobs for nature funding is disappearing, but the Kaipara Moana is probably in a slightly different situation. Would you like to just update the committee on how you see that program advancing forward, because it should still have funding, and how that's going to help the sedimentation challenge for the Kaipara.
Yes. So I think the first thing I'd say is that with these tools that are being applied more generically across our region, we can still target particular areas and actually give some better advice to existing programs or independent programs like the Kaipara remediation program to see how they can actually tailor their responses. So I think there's an opportunity there to get alongside them to actually, enhance how they do things. I think for a longer term or medium term, beyond the sort of initial envelope of funding, I'm not sure what we'll do at that point, but I think we would hope that the land users as well will be on board and be making appropriate changes to their own land practices as well. And I know that's a difficult thing when you're talking about, say, the hill country and some of the operations up there. So, we're going to have to think about how we can get alongside with fit-for-purpose responses, whether they're regulatory, whether they're grants that we might provide. We talk about grants in our report here and how that can be done for fencing initiatives. So, we should perhaps prioritise grant money going to areas of high priority for sediment, for example, as one of the factors we should consider in our grant program. So we're going to have to think about what are the avenues for landowners getting that support, and if it's no longer going to be central government, how can we sort of look at what levers at least the council might be able to provide, whether it's through fit for purpose planning rules or incentives or like grants, things like that.
I might just ask a supplementary to that, because maybe not all the members of the committee might be aware of what Kaipara Moana is, and that's a joint effort between a number of councils, including Kaipara and Regional North and ourselves. But Dave, am I correct in saying that, because you've mentioned about the technology and how you're able to use new technologies to pinpoint stuff, and it sounds like it's satellite based and that type of stuff. So am I correct in assuming that's another tool that we're able to offer programs such as Kaipara Moana to pinpoint those areas?
Yes,
that you
absolutely.
just mentioned?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, that's fantastic. My second question was just around the Unsealed Road Improvement Program and the work that you're doing there, because sometimes we can get the impression that that's all about just sealing a road, which it's not. It's about improving. It's Unsealed Road Improvement Program. And it's not getting subsidised from the government now. That's been pulled, so we're trying to fund it fully from Auckland Council's, avenues of funding. So, I guess my question is, how important in terms of because obviously in an urban environment you've got a lot of sealed surfaces, and rural it's totally different. You've just got earth that's running into these rivers and our major harbours and fishing grounds and the whole works. So I'd just like you to give your impression to the rest of the committee about the importance of making sure that that funding's in place, because it's not just about sealing the roads, it's about reducing sedimentation into the waterways.
Yes, I think the observation I'd firstly make is that we've got over 800 kilometres of unsealed road across the region. Most of them are in the Rodney district. And so what we've said is, well, we've known for many years that sediment is the main contaminant, let's say, flowing into the Kaipara. And we also know that the sedimentation rate in that Kaipara is 3 times more than other harbours. And so therefore, you need to think about, well, how do we address that particular risk? And I think we've identified that the rural roading improvement project is an opportunity to actually look at what interventions you can introduce to the rural roads, whether it's drainage or just the camber of the road, or whether it's some of the other tools that you have in the toolbox as a road engineering kind of response, to actually get some of the improvements that you might like. And we've seen that there actually are some hotspots, as one of the diagrams here, where you can see that there are some hotspots where sediment discharge is actually going into the receiving environment, and those are the things we need to really focus in on and actually get this council to say, as a particular thing that's concerning the receiving environment, that's something we need to get more targeted and more efficient responses in terms of how we actually manage that sediment discharge or avoidance of it actually getting into the marine environment. So it is an important tool, and I think the weighting that the improvement in the weighting we've provided to AT in terms of how they judge environmental benefits is actually something that should be really considered. It's not about just simply the value of having a rural road, it's about how do we manage that sediment and the environmental value associated with that in that program.
That's great. Oh, thank you for that. I might just make some comment later, Richard, but yeah, thank you for those responses.
Definitely good question and points, Councillor Sayers. Sorry, Councillor Baker.
Oh, rural fellas, hey, we're into it. Talk about dirt. Look, yeah, thanks very much, and just firstly, thanks for the I guess the ongoing engagement with the Rural Advisory Panel on that. Just in regards to that, and I see the first action as I guess the redoing of the GDO5, and just getting I guess comfort for me that, you know, forestries are huge, and I acknowledge Trish sitting out the back there, and forestry's huge, you know, sediments are a massive issue for them and erosion control sort of type stuff. Are we still engaging with the forestry liaison group in terms of, I remember Wayne Walker used to chair that in the first term of council, and sort of it's gone into quite appropriately, I'm told, is just now an industry and council officer sort of type engagement, which is probably right. But are we still engaging with them in terms of this sort of stuff? And, you know, is there going to be really, really robust engagement with not only forestry, but the likes of our horticultural people? So that's my first question. We're still going to do that?
Yes, I think that's probably more a question for the National Policy Statement for Freshwater Management implementation team, in the sense that they do have an ongoing engagement with a range of different sectors in terms of what will be the planning response. But equally, as I've mentioned during the presentation, you know, we have planning responses, but we also have operational responses, and we also have GDO5, which is about guidance in terms of, you know, practices. So I think there is a broader range of engagement that we will need to take, and that may be more of a strategic nature as opposed to sort of just simply a planning response. So I think there is an opportunity for that to occur, whether it's done through the existing liaison group or whether it's done informally through other means. That's something we'll continue to investigate.
You know, I mean, I just saw it, and so I saw that as the first action. So I thought, you know, it's incredibly important that we actually engage with those parts of our rural industry where it's a massive issue. Just in regards to that too, so the Franklin Sustainability Project, which was a project that was all about sedimentation, that came out of the 98 floods, I think it was. Is that still part of what we look at? And I did ask this at the freshwater management thing, but this is more about sedimentation. That was all about how we contain sediment that flows off our elite soils in Puki that are on the side of hills that end up in other people's backyards. Do we use that, and are we still looking at that sort of project?
We've gone back through to a number of different studies around floods and sediments and where they come from and go to. We've also looked at some of the ecological effects on our indigenous species, and some of that work was done in the late 90s. You know, it's still good information. So, yeah, we do go back and look at those events and see if we can improve our learnings on it. Sure, we've got satellite imagery now, but at the time, you know, we've got photos, people's stories. They're just as important to include in our assessment. So yeah, we do go back and look at those. Yeah.
Cool. And just last one, we were talking about it this morning, Angus Robson, Bare Dirt. So he gave a presentation at the December Hauraki Golf Forum thing, and it was all about sedimentation. He had a great presentation that just showed the damage and the amount of sedimentation from some of those building sites and developments.
Yeah, and on that, we've had a number of representations through the Hauraki Golf Forum and Auckland Council as well, and particularly in the Okura area, just acknowledging the interest from some of the councillors there. And we've been working, you know, progressively with our proactive compliance staff to actually get them to target some of the small building sites and trying to get improvements in the compliance with the sediment coming off those sites. So well aware of those sorts of use of drones as it was at that point. It was kind of like new then. But they were also focusing on, trying to focus on the urban areas in Auckland region at the same time as focusing on Southland and the dairy sector and the mud issues down there. So they were trying to do that as a combined thing to address how we would approach that kind of discharge through national regulations. And I guess regardless of that, there's still the issue for us in Auckland to actually address how those receiving environments are managed, and also distinguishing man-made discharges from natural discharges is another important factor up in the Okura region as well. So those are live issues that have been talked about for consecutive years.
Thank you. I've got 6 more questions, so we'll try and keep it tight. Mayor Brown.
Thanks for that. Rural roads are collectors and suppliers of sediment, and so, you know, whilst you're doing that, flying over those paddocks, the rural road will be what collects it and also supplies it through the surface dust as well. And dust is sediment ground up small, and fish don't like it any more than anything else. And so it's a good place to start, is in rural roads and the surface and the dust. Now, Downers have actually been making a bit of project up there along the line of combining the fine material with the crushed metal and in small additive, and getting a tight surface and having much higher cross falls and looking after the drains better, because just buying more loose metal only aggravates the situation. So, I want to know, and given the fact that we've got a very limited budget here, and you need to spend your money wisely, there has been quite a lot of money sort of out of either your budget or AT's or somewhere or other spent on rain gardens, and both myself and Craig McElroy, who is a guy I admire doing a good job at Healthy Waters, feel that rain gardens are a very poor investment in terms of what they harvest compared to upgrading road surfaces and upgrading road drain collectors. So do you have any response to that? And then the last thing is, various regional councils, and probably including this one, look aghast at waste oil as a treatment for a loose metal road surface, whereas in fact it's been proven to be a really effective, cheap, useful thing. And the fact that it's waste oil doesn't go into the environment because it adds to the, when it's mixed with the fines, it forms a new material that keeps it there, in much the same way as concrete is made out of water and a whole lot of other things. But after you've made it, it's not wet. Water doesn't come out of concrete, nor does waste oil come out of an upgraded enmeshed road surface. So could we do some tests on that? We have done tests up north. Associated with the kiwi fruit industry, because the kiwi fruit growers were losing income due to dust. Did the oil, everything's checked. You can't export a kiwi fruit with a speck of dust or a fly shit or a bit of oil on it. And after the oil went on, there was none of any of those things. So, any responses to those things, please?
So the first one, yes, we are aware of the use of mixing of different elements to sort of come up with some sort of a application that you can put across the road surface to keep sort of the sediment from discharging so quickly. So I'm well aware that we have got that sort of initiative through the industry.
Now that's good. That includes recovery of the stuff, of the loose metal from the drain, which is washed in there in the past, because loose metal becomes dust.
Yeah.
So to recover it and enmesh it with fines and an additive, and you get a great reduction.
So I think that's also where we would talk to our Auckland Transport colleagues about, well, you know, how are you, you know, assessing different responses to that kind of approach. So as opposed to kind of our expertise, which is more about sort of just making sure those things are covered off as options. So that's the first one. The second one was about rain gardens. I guess I haven't seen any particular research that sort of speaks to judging whether they're successful or not. I mean, apart from the fact that in principle they were meant to be a good thing, but of course they do raise a number of other questions in terms of their efficiency and also the maintenance involved with keeping them going. So,
And the cost in the first place.
yes, and so I'm aware of those concerns. Yeah, and thirdly was the
Would you trial waste oil?
yeah. I mean, I think. I guess if it's inert in its application, then that might be something that we can certainly look at. So again, we would probably need to approach Auckland Transport and talk to them about some of their contacts with the industry and seeing if that's something that's viable. So open to
Right,
options.
well, that's good, but when you talk to contacts in that industry, everyone has a vested interest. And so sometimes you have to do a trial away from that industry. Just speaking.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Councillor Filipaina.
Tēnā koe, Chair. Tēnā korua, Jackie and Dave. Look, the part I have flows on from Councillor Baker, and it's in regards to the building sites. So I know that there was a Close the Gap initiative from May to August of 2019. How successful was that Close the Gap initiative around building sites? Because there's more and more now. So how was that successful, and is it still going? That's the first one. Kia ora.
Yes, so in the attachment, we've actually got the graph that actually shows you the ongoing success of that program, and it's continuing to get success in terms of its application. We're basically getting roughly 70-80% pass rate in terms of inspections on small construction sites. So it basically has been a very successful initiative, and our proactive compliance unit within licensing and compliance department are continually going out and working on the basis of this sort of initiative. So it's been very successful.
Yeah, so look, the reason I mention that, and it's because the chair and deputy chair of the Regulatory and Safety Committee, because the work that was being done by the Building Consents and Resort Consent team was reported to the Regulatory Committee at that time, and it may be something that the chair and deputy chair may be looking at. Because it assists with this. So that's one thing I'll leave with the chair and deputy chair and talk to them later about. I know that this particular approach in the program, it was endorsed in at the Environment and Community Committee in 2018. Now, my question is in regards to this report, and it's around climate impact statement, and that's number 17, where the regional sediment loads are predicted to increase 36 to 75%, right, using the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change Representative Concentration Pathway 8.5. Now, based on December 2018, with the endorsement of this program, looking at this report under 17, with the possible 36 to 75, are we doing enough in regards to this program? And the second part to that pathway is based on the cameras, because we've got 23 currently and there's 27 to be installed by 2025. Is that sufficient? Because for us it's no good just, look, we haven't got the budget, therefore then this is going to fall by the wayside. And I know that the budget implications are that, that's going to be up to the mayor, but also councillors around this table. So that's the context to the two-part. Kia ora.
Yeah, really really relevant questions, and I think within the context of the initial agreement in 2018, we've sort of covered off the focus areas, and I think it's about the emphasis now that we need to provide, given that there's this new information about where we're at with climate change. I think the simple answer to your question is we could be doing more, and in fact, extension of the cameras would actually be quite beneficial to actually get the more responsive staff getting out there and actually sort of identifying where these discharges are occurring and stopping them before they actually get into the receiving environment. So if you ask the general question, could we do more? Yes. Would it be targeted? Would it be value for money? Yes. And I think it's really about working with across the council group and working the best place for those interventions to occur. But I think a broad yes is probably pretty resounding from where we've come from in terms of our assessment. And Jackie, you can add.
I think using the cameras on specific sites gives you, you can target those areas that you know are hotspots. And then with the satellite imagery, that's more regional and less often, maybe after events or if there's particular, issues that you want to look at. So it's the right tool for the right task. I'd like to see more cameras put in, not only to catch the behaviours that we know happen on some of these sites, but to stop them from happening, so that you have like an early alert system that can go to someone's phone and say, look, this is going to cause you a problem. And we can track those, because looking at your non-compliance, scores 3, if you can catch them at a 2 and get them back to a 1, you won't have that high non-compliance. So, it depends on, really how we can get on top of the problem with the early adopters, the ones who want to use this technology to stop sediments from getting into the water, and then roll it out as we prove it is valuable for everyone, actually, to try and keep our waterways as clean as possible. Yeah, kia ora.
Kia ora, thank you, Chair.
Councillor, and I think going from 23 to 50 in 1 year will be fairly heroic to see if we can actually get that done in time. But I think, if we do need to add more after that, and what the monitoring cost is as well, because no point having the cameras up if we're not watching them. Councillor Watson.
Yeah, just probably follow on to some extent from the very good questions of Councillor Filipaina there, and it really goes to the risks, I think, Dave, that you've outlined at the back of the paper in terms of, not delivering better sediment outcomes and the environmental degradation that would inevitably go with that. So just a couple of questions, and you quite rightly, Dave, you referred to the long-standing interest that a number of groups have taken in this issue, and I'm very familiar with some in my ward in Long Bay, Okura Great Park Society, and Hippokura Green, who have commissioned their own reports essentially in the past, paid not insubstantial amounts of money to investigate sedimentation. In this process, and my first question is, in this process, have we managed to tap into the expertise of those groups, who have kind of lifelong committed people? So that's the first question.
So yes, and in fact, we've got a staff meeting set up in the next few weeks where we're actually inviting some of those people to participate. So we'll take the opportunity to involve those groups and have their insights brought into the discussion with council staff.
So I'm glad to hear that, because in many respects they've sort of been leaders in highlighting the problem, capturing it, and trying to present solutions to us. So that's really good to hear. My second question goes, and it's really comes out of what we've learnt in the past, and which emerged to a greater or lesser extent in some of your next steps. And I'm thinking particularly of these big bulk earthwork sites, which you say tend to be medium or high risk activities. We know that. And in the past, particularly if you look at areas around Long Bay, around Akura, around Orewa, where we've had some pretty disturbing and ongoing sedimentation even of protected areas like marine reserves. In the past, we've had the notion that the two really fundamental problems here, and I'm just curious as to how they're going to be addressed, is one of these large sites that are just left bare. So one of the things that came through in the past was that just cover those sites, and that's a huge improvement in itself. Yeah. So I just wonder how far we've got with that. And the other one is the inadequacy of the sedimentation ponds, where they're passing the relevant standards, but in these weather events, which certainly weren't extreme as the January floods, they're just not working. They're failing. So in terms of those two specific issues, that is just covering bare land and work sites, and secondly, in addressing the inadequacy of the current rules and regulations as they go to these sedimentation ponds. What's the kind of practical next steps that are going to come with those two areas?
It's exactly what we're currently working on with some of our industry partners. Staged works, stabilising bare earth's critical. You can see when that doesn't happen, you do get sediment discharges, so that's a focus for us. The ponds are also another focus for us, and that's one of the items that we particularly want to look at, is the efficiency and effectiveness of the ponds. The Puhoi to Warkworth data has been made available to us. We're going to look through initially the non-compliant times and then work our way back to pick up exactly what's going on, so that we can then inform sort of the guideline document around ponds. So we're in the early stages. Maybe next year we'll be able to give you the answers to some of those questions, but they're a focus for us. Yeah, exactly.
Some of it also comes back to the practicalities of what extent of area is left exposed and how bulk earthworks are done. So there's some other issues that we will need to talk to the earthworks industry about in terms of how we approach that a bit more sensibly, which is the staged works that Jackie was just alluding to.
Final question, Mr. Chair. You've been very generous with your time to me. But one of the final issue that was of concern was the fines, that came out the end of these things. So we had instances where some of these big developments were non-compliant. Auckland Council did its best to enforce things, caught them out a couple of times, but the fines at the end of it were, just loose change to these people, and therefore, a barrier to affecting behaviour change. Is there anything in the work program that identifies that desirable outcome?
So you'll be interested to know that we obviously advocated quite strongly and were successful in getting into the Natural and Built Environment Act increased penalties last year. Of course, that act was then repealed, so the infringement fees were significantly increased. So we actually had been successful. There's a suggestion in terms of any new legislation coming through under the Resource Management Bill number 2, that the compliance provisions that were envisaged in the last old act now will be perhaps reconsidered and brought into the new act. So we'll still have to advocate for that as part of the resource management reform process. So no guarantees, but there's an acceptance, I believe, from central government that the existing fines are not sufficient. The regional sector, as opposed to Auckland Council, is very strong on pushing for increased penalties.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Turner.
Thank you very much. I've got a picture here. I did send it to Sandra. It's just a very non-confrontational picture of a good road. The Watapu Road at Huia has just been rebuilt. They've done a damn good job. Everybody is saying what a great job it is. They've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on it. There's one problem, as you pointed out before, it's dead flat. And there's only one reason for that. The grade is too big. talk to people from Whangarei to Rotorua, that's the areas I've spoken to, farmers, contractors, roading people who understand metal roads. And the problem you've got is, a few decades ago, the grader had a 10-foot swipe and he worked to the centre. Now we have a grader with a 28-foot swipe. You ended up with it in the gutters. You end up with the edges of the roads destabilised, loose, but most importantly, it's dead flat. How do we take the sort of stuff we're talking about here today for the last 3/4 of an hour and get it down to the problem on the ground?
Yeah, so look, we will take that back to the Auckland Transport as an example and say, you know, you guys are looking over these contracts for, you know, how these things should be delivered and the design criteria. If there's a legitimate concern about this particular construction, how can we sort that out? Because basically, I mean, I just agree with you, you know, that's not exactly a good outcome. So we would be wanting to advocate to AT to say, well, have you considered the camber of this road and why is it not serving the purpose?
Are we not the constructors of this problem? Because it's all contracted out, it's all priced to the lowest possible price. There's a disconnect there between our policies, down to the point where we no longer have a council-employed engineer signing off at the finish. Can these things fix this?
So I would think that that's where your AT responsibility is in terms of the design criteria that they should be putting in place so that those issues are addressed before they're actually contracted. So I think that's a conversation we can have to say, well, hey, this has been brought to our attention, what's the story behind this, and just see that's the whole point of this program, right, is to say we might not be doing things as effectively as what we might want to across all manner of different areas. This rural roads is something that we've been focusing on this last year, and this is something that's just something that's a bit new. But we have talked about the camber of the road as one of the design criteria in the unsealed road improvement project. So it's there. I think it's probably a contracting issue in terms of service and standards and design criteria. Has that been actually adhered to?
Thanks, Councillor. Mayor, you'd like to comment on that?
Yeah, I just want to get on that one there because, I mean, that's a picture of a new road that fails in every respect of how we do it. There is no fines in there. There is an insufficient crossfall. There's already loose metal going into the drain. It hasn't been cut out. This is a case where this is reason 384 for us taking back some control over AT. There isn't a design issue here. It's a scope and specification issue. The design is just saying we're going to go around those bloody corners. But basically, there's no fines in that. What he'll find here is the contractor that they have chosen will own a quarry. When I talked about vested interest before, that's why you have to be careful with this stuff. Downers are doing a very good job up in the Rodney area because they don't have a quarry in their area. So they're not incentivised to sell crushed metal. The contractor here, I'm not sure who it is, but I'm guessing it would be one from Dunedin.
Thank you, Mayor.
And this is a golden opportunity. You sell a lot of it. It's $45 a cubic metre for that stuff, ex-quarry. If you grade a clay fraction into that, A, you get a sealed surface that doesn't move, and B, it costs a hell of a lot less because you're not bringing in material. So this is a management and scope of contract issue, and the particular guy that AT have who manages the Downers contract is quite good, Alan somebody or other, but he's clearly not involved in that one. And so it's a good picture to raise. We'll have pictures of how to do it and how not to do it. And the mad thing is here, the one that performs worst for sediment costs the most.
Thank you, Mayor. And I think, conversation with AT, and I know that Councillor Williamson and Darby will also talk about this to us, but we should bring that up at the next TRIC meeting Councillor Baker as well, in the way it relates to sediment, because that is another goal that we need to stick in there around prioritising this work. 2 more questions. Councillor Ferry.
Thanks. Hopefully mine will be a little bit less technical. So my question was really good to see that the use of AI and the mapping work that you're doing. I'm aware that AT are doing some work around, and obviously you did say you're working with AT on the sediment control aspect, but I'm aware they've just potentially got some really cool new mapping around landslide as well. And I just wanted to check in that you're working in with them. Obviously landslide's a little bit different from sediment control, but there is a crossover there, and also with the council team, Ross Roberts and his team as well on that.
Kia ora. Yes, we're working exactly in the same space. So
Right.
the things that we've presented here, we've shown to those groups as well.
Cool, just wanted to make sure that was all joined up. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lee. Oh, you're all good? Okay. Cool, thank you very much. We've exhausted, we've exhausted you all probably, but we've exhausted questions as well, but very important topic. So really, really appreciate the work. I'll just get you to step back so we might, if there is debate on this. Councillor Sayers is the movie I'd like to read, start off.
Yeah, just as the mover, and why I wanted to move it is that, this is an excellent example of one of the Mayor's objectives to get things done better, cheaper and faster. And the fact that there's, the technologies can combine with the processes, with people, with interdepartmental cooperation, with Healthy Waters, Auckland Transport, Auckland Council's compliance divisions, Auckland Council's plans and places are all part of that mix, and maximising it bang for buck. So it's really, I was very impressed with the work that's being done there and very supportive of it. So well done. This is just good value from it. And the other thing, I'd like this committee to take away some confidence in terms of any investment into that regional unsealed road improvement program does have a significant focus on improving sediment runoff into our waterways. So I think we should just be kind of pleased about that result as well. So yeah, thanks Chair, that's all I wish to share, particularly as acknowledgement of the staff's work.
Kia ora, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Filipainen.
Kia ora, Chair. Look, Dave, to you and Jackie, thank you. And if we go back to December 2018, when this particular this program was endorsed by the Environmental and Community Committee, and that was chaired by Penny Holson, Deputy Chair myself. This work, and I want to congratulate the team on the work that you've done. I'm only going to concentrate on one piece of work because I think it sticks out. And my humble apologies to you, Dave, because I thought I had read the attachment, but I obviously hadn't, especially with closing the gaps. And closing the gaps, when you have a look at 10% compliance to 80% compliance, I mean, and we still got 20% to do, because this is why I asked the question of our staff. Is there more things we can do? Yes, we can. But, when you get that increase, and I want to go back to a comment that was made by, at the time in 2019, in July of 2019, Mr. Alan Moore, he was the general manager of the time of Signature Homes in Botany. I'm just going to read this because I think it's so important. Based on the increase that I mentioned when I had the questions that was in the report, around I think 35 to 70% increase. We just need to ensure that happens. But this is what he said in the release. And this is about the Close the Gap initiative. I believe that the Council's initiative in trying to improve sediment control on building sites across the region will have benefits that will extend far beyond what we can see and quantify now for ourselves, and will greatly benefit our next generation and beyond that will inhabit the region. So this is what he's done. So congratulations to our staff around closing the gap. It really is so supportive. 100% supportive of the program, but also with the work. Kia ora.
Kia ora, thank you, Councillor. And yeah, just want to acknowledge the team and that previous Environment Community Committee, and then of course last term under the Environment and Climate Change Committee, we refined the approach and added quite a bit of heft to the program because it proved that it was working, and also did kind of challenge some of our thoughts around those big sites when we realised it was actually the combination of lots of smaller sites too that were causing a lot of the issues. But good to acknowledge the work that the MPS FM group, the small group of us doing that work, which will land in plan changes or future plan changes around, how do we change the sediment traps? How do we change the requirements? How do we make sure, as Councillor Watson says, lift those barriers and requirements around to protect sites during heavy bouts of rain? It's probably never going to have a way to prevent sediment escaping during those sort of 2023 floods, but we do need to work better on those instances where we have heavy rainfall in a couple of days and kind of ruins all the point of having the regulation in the first place. So a lot of good work here, and we're really glad to support it. Any other comments? Oh, sorry, Member Ashby.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a real quick one from me. Again, just to echo to support the work of the staff. This is a really great project and really awesome to see some innovative tools developing. I just wanted to briefly just speak to the need for this, and we've talked about it before in terms of the increased prevalence of benched earthworks across the region, and the way that at a catchment level that's not necessarily managed. There are counter examples to that, like in the Long Bay precinct, where there's a max amount of earthworks you can have in that catchment at any one time. But also wanted to support Councillor Turner's comments there on that road, because that what some councillors might not realise is that road actually leads to a scientific reserve as well, and so which is supposed to be our most highest protected and precious sort of place, and we have that sort of carry on. So I think we all at times struggle to see into and affect change out of Auckland Transport. So I just wanted to support those comments. Good.
Thank you. All those in favour? Aye. Any opposed? Nope. Thank you. On to item 12. We have the private plan change request